Developers love to solve problems, and if no problems exist, we'll invent one. You've probably had the experience of sitting through a technical roadmap session where people are suggesting the way that we should structure our app and how we should develop it over the next 10 years. They might talk about what Scrum ceremonies we should adopt, or how we should structure the team, or how we should communicate. And a lot of the time, they'll talk with authority about these things, and it can be intimidating if you're a newer developer. But I always come back to the idea of asking why. What problem are you solving, and why is this a good solution? You'll often find that the reasoning is actually quite shallow when you look at it in depth. Here are a couple of very common reasons. Company A does this, I read a blog post, or I want this on my CV. So for the first one, Company A does this, you could say, okay, well, look, I get that Spotify organized their squads this way and they use this particular approach because it solved a problem for them. And here's all this reasoning they've given for why that was a good approach. But why does that work for us? What problems do we have on our team that this is going to solve? If we're 5 people working in a basement on an app that hasn't even reached production yet, in what way are we like Spotify? The blog post thing is actually an interesting one because I had a friend who had an experience of organizing squads for his own team. And he went off and researched for 6 months, came back and said, okay, look, here's kind of the approach I have, and here's the reasoning for it. It's based on like talking to team leads at other companies. It's based on this book I read, a couple of other things, podcasts, all this kind of stuff. Really engaged with the question. And then someone else turned around and said to him, oh, well, this blog post says that this is a better way to organize squads, so why don't we do that? Now, there's sort of an odd side to this in that we're equating 6 months of research with a quick Google search. And this is a very developer-driven thing to do. Developers will tend to go, hey, I'm going to go Google something about Express.js, and it's like, oh, I'm now an expert. Great. I've read the Docker Compose run of whatever thing I'm trying to build. And so now we need to make everything Docker. CV-driven development is a dangerous one. If someone suggests, hey, we should use a technology because I'm interested in it, I would always say that's great, but go and build something in your own time. I had the experience of building a Node.js app for a company that was expecting a high availability, low maintenance service. And I made that decision. I did it because I was kind of interested in Node.js. And I said, oh, this could be really nice. We could do some real-time stuff. We could do some interesting Socket.io operations. And this is back when Socket.io was fairly new. Node was a bit... well, it's still not stable, but it was a bit less stable. And building the service was great. I had a good experience with it. I really learned some stuff. I learned that I hate SQLize. And we got the app up into production. But about 3 weeks later, we were really regretting it. Because suddenly we had to update our packages every 2 days. And it turns out, who knew, that if you have 7,000 dependencies, things get updated all the time. And suddenly there's all these CVEs and things that need to be patched. What we should have done in that scenario was use a language that we were more familiar with and that was more mature and stable as an environment. So many of our apps written in Ruby or PHP or whatever other technology, they might update once every 6 months, and we could go and say, okay, well, let's go and update that. But this Node.js app was taking so much maintenance time that it really interfered with working on other projects. And so that was a poor decision in the moment. One of the principles I want to get across here, if you're not familiar with it, is Chesterton's fence. It's the idea that a person going through a field might come across a fence and say, this fence is in my way, we should get rid of it. And then a more responsible person might say, well, if you don't understand why the fence is there, I certainly won't let you get rid of it. go off and have a think about it, understand it properly, and then we can have a discussion about maybe getting rid of it. This is something I come across a lot with front-end development. So I'm the most senior front-end developer on our team. And I often hear from newer developers, okay, why aren't we using Tailwind? Because I've heard that Tailwind is really great. Now, Tailwind is great. It has a lot of composability. It has a lot of nice features, not loading in CSS we don't need. But that only works when you're in a fully modern app. When everything in your code base is React, you can store your Tailwind classes in a React component and import that wherever you need it. However, if you are working with a legacy code base as we are, where you have embedded Ruby templates and pages that use jQuery, suddenly you need another copy of that code in a partial on your web server or on your backend, and then you have to maintain parity between the two of them. And so the solution I've come to, which again comes back to my experience and things I'm familiar with, is to use Suit CSS. So Suit is a framework that basically combines BEM with utility classes, and it gives you the ability to have a base class, say button, and then utilities like make this flex, give this padding, this margin. And so it allows flexibility on top of the kind of structured approach of BEM. And that helps to minimize the amount of overlapping code we need to write, because we can just have a React component and a HTML partial that output the same basic HTML, but with, button instead of 600 Tailwind classes. And so that solution works for us. Now, I'm still open to the idea that, hey, Tailwind might be something we can work with. And so if someone asks about it, I'll explain my reasoning, but I'll be open to, well, do you think we could do it better with Tailwind? And so asking why is important in these scenarios. And not locking yourself into an idea. It's like, why did I make this decision? That's part of it. But why should I change it? Has to be a genuine question. You can't just say, I'm not changing it because there's my reasoning and you can't convince me otherwise. But what I often find with developers is that they haven't considered the reasoning. It's sort of a case of, well, I've heard that Tailwind is what everyone should use because it's the best. And it's like, okay, well, yes and no. There's some trade-offs here. And essentially, our scenario is not everyone else's scenario necessarily. So explaining why is actually a very good way of justifying your solutions. But there is the issue of a lot of people just don't engage with that. I've had the experience of explaining our design system and all of the underpinning technology to people and why I've made these decisions, and they sort of go, oh no, just tell me what to write and I'll write it, That's okay to some extent. Like, if it's not your area, yeah, you don't really need to engage with, why are we using this framework or whatever else. If you're a back-end developer and you just want to be told, hey, write your code this way, great. But I really think engaging with the questions of why are a big part of what makes you a better developer. Really understanding what the decisions are that you've made and what the reasoning behind them was, because it helps you make better decisions in future. So next time you're in that meeting, ask why. Have a good one.